Come Saturday, December 10th, we mark Human Rights Day. And in light of this occasion, today we address the state of these rights in the Asian continent. So what is the state of women's rights in Iran? And what is the state of human rights in North Korea? Ultimately, what is being done to better address these plights? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today we shed light on the fight for greater freedom for women in Iran and the state of human rights up in North Korea. For more, I have Professor Annabelle Sreberny at SOAS University of London. Professor Sreberny, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good to be here. Thank you, from London.
Right. I also have Professor Lee Jung-Hoon at Yonsei University joining us virtually as well. Professor Lee, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Sreberny, we'll start with you then. Let's begin with a few words, perhaps, on the state of women's rights in Iran, also including a bit of history behind the hijab, please.
I think the struggle for women's rights has been part of Iranian revolutions throughout the 20th century. There were two, the constitutional revolution in 1906 and the revolution that actually brought down the monarchical structure in 1979. And the covering and uncovering of women has been part of a much wider politics. So as part of the modernization program in the 1930s, the then Shah, Reza Pahlavi, forcibly unveiled women, which was a very traumatic moment for many. The revolution of February 1979 was a popular, anti-imperialist, pro-democracy mobilization that became increasingly Islamic and produced the Islamic Republic. But it rapidly abrogated various social rights that women had won under the last Shah. It brought in mandatory hijab, the religious covering for women, censored the media. And within 1 month of the revolution, in March 1979, women were back on the streets of Iran shouting, "At the dawn of freedom, women's place lies empty." Now Islamic Republic is a patriarchal theocratic structure where older men rule under the notion of velayat al-faqih, the supreme jurist. Women don't enjoy equal citizenship with men, nor adequate social protections, including guardianship of their own children, divorce, travel, or equality under the law. The regime tries to maintain its popular mandate from the revolution in political processes, so women can vote, unlike some countries in the region. But we would have to say that democracy is increasingly performative, not real, as there are no independent political parties, and no woman has been allowed to stand for president, banned by the Religious Guardian Council. The hardline president, the current president, Raisi, produced a 119-page document last year about hijab and chastity that controls contraception and abortion and continues to mandate hijab. But really it wants to return women to private family life and reproduction in order to increase the population to 150 million, as Ayatollah Khamenei, the current supreme leader, wants. The regime's problem is that more women have joined the workforce and are experiencing high inflation and economic difficulties. More women are educated. 60% of university students are women, many in STEM subjects, but they don't find appropriate work. So what the regime is doing goes against the grain of a slow social revolution in mores and attitudes that move against a hardline Shiite ideology and this has been unfolding, and Raisi's hardline crackdown is simply not going to work.
Right, I see. And before we delve further into that, Professor Lee, staying with human rights though, could you tell us a bit about the status quo up in North Korea?
Well, before going into North Korea, let me first commend Arirang TV for remembering the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which of course was adopted by the UN General Assembly back in 1948. As you know, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is like the global constitution of human rights. So it's a very, very important document. Secondly, my heart goes out to Mahsa Amini, her family, and all the victims of the brutal government crackdown in Iran. I just want the Iranian people who might be watching this to know that they're not alone and that the world is watching the atrocities being committed by the government. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is really a milestone document which claims the inalienable rights that everyone is entitled to as human beings, regardless of your race, color, religion, sex, political inclinations, and what have you. Is it being violated in Iran? Of course it is. Is it being violated in North Korea? Absolutely. In fact, there are 30 articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and North Korea is violating every single one of the 30 articles that's there in the Universal Declaration. And the details of the atrocities, human rights violations being perpetrated in North Korea has been very well documented, particularly in the UN's Commission of Inquiry report, which was headed by Michael Kirby, 1-year investigation, and the report came out in 2014. And it details the crimes against humanity being perpetrated in North Korea. Now, crimes against humanity is up there on par with genocide as the two worst crimes in international law. So crimes against humanity is being committed in North Korea, such as the continuation of the existence of political prison camps, public execution, no trials, infanticide, torture, sexual violations of all sorts, abduction, on and on and on. So nothing has changed in North Korea. Okay, that's the sad truth about the status quo in North Korea, that nothing has changed and things are as usual in North Korea, which is at its absolute worst.
Right, very sad and of course very, very shocking. Meanwhile, Professor Sreberny, how do you explain the public fervor fueling the current protests over in Iran?
I think we have to understand that there's been unrest and confrontation with the regime throughout the 43 years of the Islamic Republic. It's been a highly politicized environment. Many Iranians are in exile. Many political leaders from 2009 remain under house arrest. There are many political prisoners. And it's not only women who've been fighting for their legal and social rights. There were huge protests after the so-called stolen election in 2009 when Iran turned green, but that was predominantly a Tehran-centric and middle-class movement. There have been big strikes in 2017, 18, 19 around economic issues. Protesters were angry at the removal of food subsidies and a threefold rise in petrol prices. Then there were already shouts of down to Khomeini, the supreme leader. Those protests were brutally crushed with 1,500 known deaths, and none of these protests lasted longer than 1 week. Minorities have always had to fight for their cultural and political rights. Mahsa Amini, whose name has already been invoked here, was a Kurd, and she couldn't be formally named as Jinnah, which is her Kurdish name. And the youth, which is 60% of Iran's population under 30, see no future for themselves. The Islamic Republic, despite its ideological desire, is not totalitarian like North Korea, but it's a culturally leaky environment. There's been a massive brain drain with over 4 million Iranians in a worldwide diaspora who tell Iranians at home what life is like elsewhere. And even it could be suggested that the COVID lockdown sent young people onto the internet surfing and seeing what's happening elsewhere. They're very well informed. This time, since the murder of Mahsa Amini, all the different oppositional elements have come together in an intersectional uprising. It's geographically widespread across the country. It's driven by the young, but their parents are there too. It includes ethnic minorities, especially the Baluch, who've experienced horrible violence recently, and the Kurds, who've also suffered brutally. It includes university students and school children. It includes workers. It includes ordinary men and women who are being impoverished, while a small coterie, mainly connected to the Revolutionary Guards, the IRGC, have become hugely rich. Most Porsche in the world were imported into Iran recently, and their rich children live in Los Angeles and elsewhere. I would argue that the spark of Amini's death fell on the dry tinder of economic, environmental, and political crises facing Iranians, as well as the crisis of women's rights. There's impoverishment, environmental decay, water shortages, dust storms, and terrible general mismanagement. And I'd invite the audience to look for on the internet a wonderful song called Baroye, For, which rapidly became the anthem of this movement. And it notes this range of crises facing Iranians. I invite everyone to find and listen to it.
Right, I'm sure they will. Professor Lee, Professor Sreberny spoke about the murder of Mahsa Amini, and staying with these appalling atrocities, media reports recently claimed that North Korea, back in early October, had executed teenagers for watching South Korean TV shows. Could you tell us a bit more about the shocking event?
Right, so the news of this came out quite recently, but apparently the public execution took place in October. Now, there were 3 teenagers who were summarily tried and executed, 2 of them for the crime of watching South Korean movie. And one of them, third one, was committed for murdering his stepmother. So, that goes to show you that North Korea puts on the level of watching South Korean movies and dramas at the same level as murder. Now, the 2 teenage boys who were summarily executed for watching South Korean movies, this took place in the northern part of North Korea, very close to the border with China. It's Hamgyeongnam-do in Yanggangdo, Haesan시. It took place actually on an airfield runway. So a very public place, all the people in the surrounding area summoned to watch the public execution taking place. Now, these teenagers or anyone else, if you watch it, you're sent to labor education camps. If you are caught twice, you're sent to camps for 5 years, but not only yourself, but your parents as well get sent to these labor camps. So the ones who get publicly executed are the ones who are accused of actually distributing and selling these South Korean dramas or movies. So apparently the accusation must have been that they weren't just watching, but somehow they were distributing it. Probably, I mean, these are teenagers, so probably watching alongside other teenagers as well. And they were made scapegoats, or they were made examples of what not to do in that society. Now, the world is really aghast and shocked at what has just taken place. But quite frankly, if you're a watcher of North Korean human rights, this is nothing unusual.
But this is
a
the
very
first time, Professor, that they've killed teenagers, though, is it?
Teenagers, yes.
And this is the first time they've actually killed teenagers. We've had stories of adults being killed.
Right. So I mean, we don't know that. I mean, we don't know all the information. We have, there's absolutely no way of getting all the information to come out of North Korea. So I would be very surprised if they are really the first teenagers. They might be the first teenagers reported to have been executed. But I wouldn't be surprised that there were many other cases that we're not aware of, where the teenagers might have been publicly, summarily executed in the past.
Right, probably, and I would have to agree with you there. And of course, come Friday, authorities here in South Korea will be holding a meeting on North Korea's human rights situation. I'm afraid that is all the time we have for today's discussion, though. Professor Lee, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Sreberny over in London, thank you so much for making time to join us live at this very early hour at your end. All right, well, on that note, we end Thursday's edition of Issues and Insiders. We return same time tomorrow with the Foreign and Environment Ministers from the Gabonese Republic. Do join us then. Thank you for now.